On blast.
Thank you. You're far too kind for tuning in once again to a little thing we like to call the On Blast podcast. As always, my name is Sheldon Alexander. I'm joined by my guy, Andrew Webster. Webby, what is good?
Man, listen, you can find me in the Space Jam bubble, just hanging out.
You teased this a while ago. I thought these were the two best episodes by far that we've seen so far of the doc. You were correct. But I do want to also say huge shout to the people that have been rocking with us as we have been carrying through on this On Blast podcast, and we've been following the Jordan doc. This is the review of episodes 7 and 8 of The Last Dance doc, and huge shout to the people that have been rocking with us on iTunes, SoundCloud, yes, Spotify, YouTube, liking and subscribing and rating and ranking and sharing with their friends, all that fun stuff. But I got to say something right off the bat. I can't believe that there's only one more week left of these. Because in the beginning, it seemed like, 10 episodes. This is going to take so long. This is going to be,
go on
every week. And now here we are, 7 and 8. And you mentioned it, Webby, before. These were the two best episodes, and it lived up to the hype, even with the hype going in. I talk about this all the time. Sometimes I'm always worried about when things get hyped up too much, that maybe it might not deliver, but boy, did these episodes deliver, no?
Oh, 100%. I mean, these are the two episodes that you're going to be like, these are the ones that kind of boil down why this 10-episode series has been so good. Because as we're going to get into, it shows you into a part of Jordan that you thought you knew, but there's just so much rich history, and the reactions, like it boils down, like the reactions with him and the iPad are so good. The stories, like I said, that you may have heard, you may have read about, but now you're getting them right from Jordan's mouth. And then, of course, like the legend building stuff, like as I'm sure we're going to get into.
For sure. And sorry,
I was going to say the other thing is that this is where my leak ended. So I am back on par with everybody else. So I will be there on Sunday night with the illegal stream of ESPN to get in these episodes.
What? I don't even know what you're talking about. What are you talking about?
We just need to maybe blank that part out, like put a little beep in there, like censor it. But yeah, no, I'm hoping to be watching that on Sunday, like I did with episodes 1 and 2. Because man, I mean, like we're at the point that now this is like obviously must see TV, right?
So yeah, let's get right into it. Because I thought, again, best 2 episodes, but I think the last 2 minutes or so of episode 7 were definitely like the best part of this doc, I found, anyways, and it was just kind of summing up.
That's him getting emotional, right? Where he's
it's a part where he's kind of, he's encompassing why he's kind of the way he is, because a lot of that episode centered around how he treated his teammates, which we'll get to in a bit. But to me, I thought hearing him explain this, and I'm going to read the quote because I just thought it was so good, but I thought hearing him explain this kind of summed up why we're all here, right? Because they're trying to get an insight into the inner workings of Michael Jordan and how, someone achieves that level of success in whatever field. And that to get to that level, it takes a different kind of mindset, but to hear him explain it was incredible. So I'm going to read this. So follow me for a second here as I apologize, as I do every once in a while on the pod, where we do a segment that's just Sheldon reads. But we'll start here, okay? And because this is just what I thought was incredible. So we start with the question from the director, and the question is, through the years, do you think that intensity has come at the expense of being perceived as a nice guy? Jordan's answer, he says, well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, winning has a price, and leadership has a price. So I pulled people along when they didn't want to be pulled. I challenged people when they didn't want to be challenged. I earned that right because my teammates came after me. They didn't endure all the things that I endured. Once you joined the team, you lived at a certain standard that I played the game, and I wasn't going to take anything less. Now, if that means I had to go in there and get in your ass a little bit, then I did that. You ask all my teammates. One thing about Michael Jordan was he never asked me to do something that he didn't fucking do. Sidebar, appreciate the swearing.
Yeah,
for emphasis,
absolutely.
and it was real and raw. But
Yeah,
I'll continue.
100% a boss quote. Like that part that's when you're like, yeah, man, absolutely.
Right? At this point, I'm like on the edge of my couch already, hype. And then he keeps going. He says, when people see this, they're going to say, quote, well, he wasn't really a nice guy. He may have been a tyrant. Close quote. No, that's you, because you've never won anything. I wanted to win, but I wanted them to win and be a part of that as well. Look, I don't have to do this. I'm only doing this because it is who I am. That's how I played the game. That was my mentality. If you don't want to play that way, don't play that way. And then at that point, he starts to get emotional and he just kind of signals to the camera and he says break. And it was just great, storytelling where they have like the pregnant pause. And then it just cuts, and that was the end of the episode. And MJ sitting there in tears. And it was just like, I'm sitting there thinking, what did I just watch? Like, that was incredible. What was your reaction to that moment of the end of episode 7?
Well, just that it was the end of episode 7 and not the end of episode 10. Because, like you say, that pretty much, no, for real, that pretty much encapsulates, like, the message of this documentary, and again, the reason why we're so enamored with like MJ and like the legend of Michael Jordan, right? And he puts it so succinctly. I mean, you couldn't write it any better than that. It's incredible, and like that's the thing. It's the I would never ask my teammates to do anything that I wouldn't put myself through. Like that's just boss.
I was talking to McAlph earlier, and I sent him an email about like just what happened in the episode, and I described it as, follow me here. I described this moment as when Drake drops an album, and then there's all these quotables, and the girls all rush to Instagram to put that in their captions.
Yeah.
That was me, right? That was me when I hear my guy like, winning has a price, leadership has a price. I was just like, holy shit! Like the way that it just hit me, and it's MJ. We know the allure. We know the 6 championships. We know all that. But to hear him just explain it all, and after you've seen 8+ hours, or at that point, I guess 7 hours, of him explaining and giving context to the 6 championships, that just made the moment so much more incredible. And, people kind of had a weird reaction to him getting emotional at the end. Like, what was your take on that? What did you read into his tears, literal tears at the very end?
Yeah, it was a little strange because it wouldn't be something that you might think that would bring somebody, especially like Michael Jordan, to tears, right? I mean, that would be something that you might think would be a given with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the situation, man. It's like winning, you pay a price. Leadership, you pay a price. But he just believes in it so much, and it's so a part of his identity and who he is and what he's done and his legacy, to be quite honest, that it may seem simple to us or to people watching at home, like he says, somebody who hasn't won anything, but to him, in that it was like his mantra, what he believes in, why he's so successful. So it's just so important to him. That's what I made of it.
Do you know what it is? It's like, to me, it was him finally. So think about this, right? Like, my guy's been sitting there stirring since his retirement for how long? And obviously the competitor that he is, he's thinking about what his legacy is, right? And he says, I don't have to do this. I'm assuming he's talking about the doc, right? I'm doing this because this is who I am. And I think like that was his sole purpose in trying to give people a real life true insight into why he did the things he did, a realistic view into why you might think he's an asshole, right? And all these other things that led to him winning championships. But overall, the thing that I got from it was when he's talking about, that's you because you've never won anything. I wanted to win, but I wanted to bring them with me. Like when he's talking about that, to me, it's kind of like, everybody in their life, whatever you do, there's something that you've been working towards. There's goals that you set in your life. And some have bigger goals than others, obviously. And for him, everything that he put into it, I think that's what the emotions were that were coming out. Like him trying to describe, every single high and low and every blood, sweat, and tears. And pardon the cliche, I don't mean for it to sound so cheesy, but literally everything that he put into achieving these goals and how hard it was, and him trying to explain that to someone else while knowing that he probably sounds crazy while doing it. Do you know what I mean? But
oh yeah,
I think that's where the emotion came from. And just, he had to kind of take a break. And that's where he says, him saying, that was my mentality. If you don't want to play that way, don't play that way. That's him, saying, I understand I might kind of sound crazy here, but that's how I wanted to play. And you don't have to do that. I'm not saying that I'm right, but that's just what worked for me. And my dude, Webby, I'll say this much, man. I know MJ was worried about what his perception would be after people watch this. I like him like 10 million times more after watching this.
Again,
what
like
do you think,
that's
man?
the thing. You keep waiting for the part of like, when am I going to start to really think that MJ is an asshole, or when am I really going to see him in a light that casts him in a more negative way than I grew up idolizing him and worshiping him. And that just hasn't happened in this documentary so far. If anything, I feel like even as a little kid, I took him for granted, right?
Yeah. Yo, for sure. And it's so cool too. It's a perfect that you bring that up, right? Because I was thinking, obviously as kids, we like Michael Jordan. And that's just because we liked sports. He was everywhere. Like, it's all in our face. Be Like Mike, his catchy ass song, all those things. And then as you get older, there's different reasons why you appreciate, right? Like, you appreciate greatness. Like, you're drawn to, as some people like to call it, genius, right? Someone who's achieved the highest level of success in their profession. We're attracted to that. We're intrigued by that because we want to know more about it. And now as an adult, as we, wind and weave our way through life, for us, we have like such a different appreciation of it now, getting to see the inner workings and, what pushed someone. And I hate saying it because it sounds like the cliches, but the hard work actually paying off. Like, the other part that was weird was his trainer, Tim Grover, at one point when he was describing MJ being the hardest working guy ever. Like, you could see him getting kind of emotional, right? And he's talking about MJ's just like work ethic in the training room. So I don't know. I wanted to start here because I thought that was the most like important thing that came out of the episodes. And there were so many things that came out. But in terms of that, would you agree that that was probably the best part so far of the doc?
Well, yeah. And like I say, it's the part that definitely like wraps up who Jordan is, why he was so successful, and why we all idolize him.
Yeah, like the whole doc could have definitely ended right there, but, we're glad it didn't because there's still so much more goodness to talk about from these 2 episodes and also 2 more episodes coming up this weekend. So we'll get to a little bit more of what happened in the episode, and feel free to jump in at any point because we're just going to kind of go through some of the bigger moments and storylines. So we'll start with the death of MJ's dad and him really going to play baseball. And at that point, 1994, I was watching it and thinking, okay, how much of this do I remember happening at the time? Because I'm, 11 at this point? 10, 11 years old?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, I remember it a bit, but I definitely did not remember parts of the details. Like, I didn't remember exactly that his dad was missing for 3 weeks. And they found like I didn't remember that
like part. I remember all of this. Like this was because I was, an MJ guy. So every day, every morning was spent watching Sports Center, reading the newspaper, looking at the box scores, reading about the games. And then when this happened, for 3 weeks, for almost a month, it was like, oh my God, where is Michael Jordan's dad? Is he dead? Are they going to find him? Did he just, it was tragic. And then when it was officially announced, I just being a selfish little 10-year-old, I was like, I don't want him to leave basketball. Even back then, I had a feeling that I couldn't even imagine losing my dad at 10 years old, let alone being the most famous person on earth. And so even back then, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, man, I really hope this doesn't mean that he's going to stop playing basketball.
It was super weird, and I kept thinking too, like, I couldn't even, you mentioned like not being able to fathom losing your father in that way at that time, but then also having to do that while all these rumors and speculation are swirling. Like, once the story came out that, you know, the car was robbed and two 18-year-olds were charged for the murder, but like there's so much speculation and rumors going around in the media basically blaming you for it. Like, I couldn't fathom what that could be like. And I thought it was, you know, it told a lot when Ahmad told the story about, you know, going to meet him for the funeral and he couldn't even like tie up his tie.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Ahmad had to help him fix his tie. Like, it was such a weird time. And, you know, I just kept trying to think back. What do I remember from that? And it was cool in that sense, as the doc has done the whole way through, doing a good job of setting the scene, painting the picture for you in terms of what the climate was at the time. So you were going to say something, though.
Yeah, well, the funny part, well, not the funny part, but the very like fascinating part about this documentary is the way that it's linked to the O.J. Simpson documentary, right? Mm-hmm. And this story of Michael Jordan's missing dad and ultimately his murder, and the way that the media and the public reacted to it by trying to dig down deeper to see there must have been more nefarious things going on, what was really behind all this, is like almost a perfect lead-in to what ended up happening with the O.J. Simpson chase and the trial. In the way that the media covered it, a black athlete, somebody who was super, super famous and really the face of their sport for a long, long time. It was like this was the appetizer, this tragic story was the appetizer to what ended up being another tragic story with OJ. And that's what I remember thinking watching this documentary about this part of his life, was just the kind of parallels and the way that 94 leads into 90. I mean, because then the OJ chase would have been maybe a couple of
95.
No, I think the chase was 94. So he was playing baseball then. So he about a year later, right, that he had that all this had happened, and it just seemed like those two events are so interconnected in my mind, and then this documentary kind of reinforced that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy to think about, just like, you know, how messed up that moment in time was. And you're totally right. You know, all these things going on around the same time, and the high profile that's going on with both things. But, you know, obviously it's a crazy and a sad situation. And with all this, it leads to the decision that Michael Jordan makes that he's going to retire from basketball. And obviously there's so much speculation, and they touch on it in the doc, which I was kind of surprised that they did, to be honest. Like, when we talked about this doc, you know, I always said I wasn't sure. I want to hear them seriously talk about these things, and I wasn't sure they were going to. And they at least made the people involved answer for it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, MJ had to give an answer. Stern had to give an answer. I thought that was good enough for me. But I mean, you know, seeing it now and hearing the conspiracy theories, I mean, I can say that I don't think that anything fishy was really going on. Also, just because I'll say this, the biggest reason I'll always say that is I just don't believe that you could keep that under wraps, that Michael Jordan would have gotten suspended in some secret suspension, and they would have kept it quiet and nobody would know, and it never would have gotten out. That just seems weird to me.
I agree with you in terms of, like, I don't think that there was anything that nefarious behind it. However, I think that based on the time that this all happened, that you could have covered it up. I mean, we still really don't know exactly who killed JFK, and before the days of social media, like infiltrating our lives and especially the sporting world. You definitely would not be able to get away with anything like that today. But in the early mid-90s, for sure, you probably could. Now, that being said, is Stern going to suspend his meal ticket for a year and a half? Probably not.
Right.
Also,
Stern's a businessman.
Isn't it strange that he was suspended for 18 months? Like, what is that? Like, if you were going to suspend him, wouldn't it just be for a year or 2 years? Like, the 18 months thing didn't really make sense to me. But honestly, why would the NBA ever get rid of the guy who is the face of the league and the number one moneymaker for the league?
Yeah, Stern is a businessman above all, and to like get rid of MJ at the peak of his powers, regardless of what's going on, doesn't make sense. But also, they do such a good job of painting the narrative and setting the scene for him being burnt out. Like, that actually makes sense. If you think about, the run that MJ's had from, 89? They made the conference finals and lost to the Pistons?
Even...
No, but I'm just saying, like, having
even earlier
deep
than that, he was... Right.
They're having runs, but I'm saying, like, getting to the conference finals at least, right? So you're going from then all the way through to that 93 season, add in an Olympics in the offseason, and it's just like, you could understand a dude being burnt out and also feeling like he's accomplished, like, what more was left, right? And I think the writer who told the story about speaking with Mike at the Olympics and saying that at that point, Mike already told him what his plan was, that he just really wanted to get through finishing the Olympics, winning the third title, which neither Magic or Larry did, but he wanted to achieve those two things, and then he was going to shock the world and quit basketball to play baseball. Like, that's before his dad died, before the Olympics, all that. So it's just super interesting that all these things were there, and I think it kind of makes sense especially when you add in the relationship he had with his dad and how tough it was for him when he comes back now, when he realizes, oh, this is going to be my first NBA basketball game without my dad watching. Do you know what I mean? Like, with all that, and you think about it and put it back in that moment, you can understand why he would be like, I don't have a reason to play basketball right now. Like, that kind of makes sense, no?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's the thing, is that while you said, and the thing that you sent me is like, do you think there was anything fishy about the retirement? I'm sure there was probably something out there that maybe he wasn't as forthcoming about, whether it was back then or in this documentary, about why. Because, but that being said, like, he had made, like the writer said, like, this didn't come out of nowhere to a lot of people, right? Like, and we talked about it, I think, the last episodes as well, is like the reverence that Jordan had for Larry and Magic, right? So getting that three-peat was huge to him. Being the guy on the dream team, huge to him. What else do you have to prove? He's basically a shut-in when he's not playing now. He's the most famous person on earth. And I think that we're going to get into, the life of a double-A baseball player. But I think that had some real draw to him to not be the guy. Now, again, like, he kind of ends up being a magnet for press coverage, but like, I'm sure that riding the bus definitely appealed to him.
Yeah, I think too, the one thing I kept thinking of was, can you imagine that happening now in like the Twitter era? Just that whole story. Like, the most famous athlete in the world wins an NBA championship, their father gets murdered, and then they retire and then decide to play another sport. Like, imagine that in the Twitter era. Like, that would just be absolutely insane. Like, I can't even fathom any of that.
No, it would be it would be crazy.
Right. It'd be so stupid. But with that said, the other thing that it does a good job in telling the story of MJ saying his last conversation he had with his dad was that he was going to go play baseball, and his dad told him to go do it. And so you kind of understand where that decision comes from. The one thing I was going to tell you, though, that I totally forgot about was the Jays White Sox playoff game that MJ threw out the first pitch and then is in the box and word starts to trickle out that he's going to retire? Like, I totally forgot about that. That part I did not remember at all. And I would assume I'd be watching that game as a kid.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even for sure, like being 10, 11, and the second run of the Jays playoffs, for sure. Not only that, but they're playing the White Sox, a team that I also like because they had Frank Thomas as well, right? So, definitely tuning into that. But that's the moment that I could relate to with this social media age that we live in now. That kind of murmur going around, and then all of a sudden everybody kind of knows something is going on. That kind of reminded me of the Osama bin Laden is dead game. It was a Mets-Phillies game, and it was same kind of thing. It was like, oh, there's something going on. People are kind of getting like, the president's going to make an announcement in a couple of minutes, like an hour, and then throughout the stadium you could see people getting it on their phone, the information, and then finally, like, everybody chanting USA. Now, obviously, there's no Twitter going on in 94 or 95 or whatever, but the fact that this gets out and it's kind of like you see all the people in the box and then the press trying to get into the private box and them escaping, man, that was something that I could relate to nowadays, right?
Yeah, it was just cool to see like Pat O'Brien like having to, give an update in the middle of the game, just announcing what was going to happen. Like, that's just so crazy. MJ goes to play baseball, and I'm guessing you've seen...
And Terry Francona is his manager, which is the craziest... That was the craziest thing to me when I was watching this.
Yeah, and I mean, it's crazy on so many levels, and the doc, MJ, is it Michael rides the bus or MJ rides the bus? What was the...
Yeah, I think it was 30 for 30 Michael rides the bus. Yeah. I think it was Michael rides the bus, but I could be wrong.
There's a pretty good 30 for 30 on it, which Mike isn't actually in. And I remember the story behind it, and I kind of wish he wasn't. Like, it was a really good doc, period. But Mike being in it obviously would have been so much more incredible. But the reason he wasn't in it was because, if you remember back, it was right around the time when he did his Hall of Fame speech, and everyone kind of, he was getting crushed for his speech because he was like, people said he still seemed bitter, the crying Jordan meme, all that stuff. And so he decided he wasn't going to be in the doc, which, again, still a good watch for anybody. But in terms of what they had in this doc, a couple things here. First off, I didn't know about I didn't remember the crazy hitting streak he had to start his AA career. Like, that's insane. 13-game hitting streak he does to start his career in AA. And also just the fact that the only reason I thought Reinsdorf did such a good job in painting the picture of, hey, when someone just starts playing baseball, they go to rookie ball or single A. And the only reason they put him in AA was because AA had the facilities to account for all the media that would show up to cover Mike. Like, I thought that was incredible. Like, that's just so random. But what did you take away from just seeing the whole baseball portion of this? Like, what things stuck out to you the most?
The thing that stuck out to me most about the baseball was that Jordan brought the same intensity of preparation and work ethic to this sport as he did with basketball. There's the story of him taking batting practice in the morning, then before the game, and then sticking around after the game is done to take more batting practice. But even with all of that preparation, all of that work ethic, baseball is a different beast than basketball. I mean, obviously they're different sports, but you could practice all the time. But if you don't have the eye and you can hit the curveball, which we found out that MJ was having a very tough time doing, it doesn't matter how many cuts you take in the cage. If you can't hit the curveball, you're not going to make the majors.
Yeah, so he hit 202, drove in 50 runs, and Francona says that he thinks if he had 1,500 at-bats, he could have made it to the big leagues. And I think, I forget what the number was, but I think in what's it called? What's a fall league? I think he hit like 260 or something like that in the fall league. So
couple of
it's super
dingers
interesting.
too, right?
Well, it just makes you wonder, right? What would have happened if the strike didn't happen in the MLB that year? Because, to start the year, there was a strike and they wanted to have the replacement players, which was obviously a ridiculous plan. But they wanted MJ to cross the picket line, and he's like, no, of course I'm not doing that, right? Like, so
Hell
ridiculous
no.
that you would think Michael Jordan,
Like,
another
dude,
professional
don't you know that
player.
I'm like, yeah,
right? But,
in another union.
Yeah, and he's going to cross, like, that just made no sense that you would think that he would do that. But anyways, it makes you wonder what would have happened if there was no strike that year and if he would have continued playing baseball. But as we know, there was a strike, and that kind of led him to kind of wonder, kind of brought him back to see if he wanted to play basketball. But before we get back to the basketball, a couple things here. I thought that, I thought it would have been crazy to see Michael Jordan play in the big leagues. Like, I just think that storyline that was already kind of insane would have just been even more insane. And the thing that I found weird was him being so mad at the media. Like, I didn't get why the media would be rooting for him to fail. And that's kind of, and I know that this is, there's a argument going on now about the doc and if it's an actual documentary and if this is journalism or just MJ's spin on everything. But with that said, I don't get why, people would be kind of almost applauding him failing at baseball. Like, I don't get why that would be a narrative. But it appeared to be, right? Like, SI was super mad. Not super mad, I shouldn't say that. But they crushed him on the cover once. And then because of that, MJ never spoke to Sports Illustrated ever again, which I think is incredible.
Yeah.
But do you think he could have made it to the bigs?
No, I don't think he... Well, no. Let me rephrase that. Yeah, I do think he would have made it to the big leagues because Jerry Reinsdorf, who owned the White Sox as well, is no dummy when it comes to being a businessman. And by putting Michael Jordan on a big league roster, you're going to get people who are clamoring to come and see him play.
Yeah.
Now, do I think he would have had like success in the major leagues? No way. Like like I say, man, it's a different beast. And Jordan, for all the skills that he had in playing basketball, it's just so like it would be like you say, it would be insane. Like it would be even a bigger story than Michael Jordan was originally if he had made it to the major leagues. Now I remember I used to get Sports Illustrated all the time. Like, well, my dad did, and then I would read them. And I remember one issue, I think it might have been before the baseball thing was official, was like a picture, like they had superimposed Jordan into all these other sports. So like there's a picture of him playing hockey as a member of the Blackhawks. There's a picture of him as a wide receiver for the Bears. And I was like, oh my God. And so I went to my dad. I was like, Dad, is Michael Jordan going to be playing hockey? And he was like, no. He's like, no, these are fake pictures that they just did for the magazine. I was like, holy crap. But as a 11-year-old, I was totally convinced that Jordan, oh my God, he could definitely play hockey and he could definitely play football. I mean, if Deion Sanders can play football and baseball, why can't the best athlete of all time play all four professional sports?
Yeah, it was cool to think about it from the aspect of, I don't think people realize how hard it would be to hit 200 in AA after not playing baseball for 14 years. Like, that is a crazy accomplishment on its own.
Right? It's insane. He was like he was like 31. It's not like he was like a young dude who had just stopped playing baseball.
Yeah, like it makes no sense, right? So you stop playing baseball for 14 years, and then you're hitting 200 in AA baseball with and AA is where your top prospects are, right? For people who aren't familiar with how baseball farm systems work, your top prospects are always in AA. And so it's just weird to think of it from that aspect, but also with what you just said, how much further he actually had to go to, get to the Michael Jordan status of baseball, which I don't think was realistic, but even just to be, a really good major leaguer would have taken so much more. And you heard Grover talk about, how they had to rebuild his body because the body of a baseball player is completely different than the body of a basketball player. And all of those things you had to work on. It was just really interesting and captivating, but one of the best, like, what ifs, what if there was no baseball strike? But let's keep things going and move on here because there's so much going on in this episode. And, the next kind of big thing is MJ, the competitor. And we got a great montage of MJ just ripping into teammates, most notably Scotty Burrell, as you mentioned earlier.
Was, wow.
There were some...
Make that free throw, ho.
Right. Oh, man, I just love it. And it was so good. And, the beauty of all this MJ talking trash that we have to remember is that it's not in the era of right now when guys understand how the media works. What I mean by that is guys nowadays know that something's going to go viral, or this is going to end up on First Take, or this is going to be a talking point on SportsCenter. Like, guys kind of know how the 2020 sports news cycle works. Then the videos that we're seeing, like, that's just MJ.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that to me is incredible. And the thing I thought about as he crushes Scott Burrell is, okay, Scott Burrell's obviously his boy and is in this doc, but there's other teammates that clearly weren't along for this ride and did not think too highly of MJ. We're just not hearing from them, right?
I mean, absolutely. There must have been other guys on that team who maybe didn't necessarily take to that style of leadership the way that a guy like Scott Burrell or even Steve Kerr ends up going through. Like, there's got to be other guys that they must have shipped out after this kind of experiment went wrong.
Yeah. I mean, MJ just talking about how he liked Scott Burrell, he's a really good guy, and he literally tried to get him to fight him a couple times. It's like, that is incredible. Do you think MJ was a good teammate?
Of course he was a good teammate. Like, look at some of the teams that he dragged to the championship. Like, are you kidding me? Of course he was a good teammate. The best teammate. And honestly, if you have somebody with that much talent who is that invested in you that he's going to make your life a living hell, or rag on you every day to try and make you better, or get in your ass like that to try and make you better, isn't that a way better teammate than a guy who has all that talent who completely leaves you alone and doesn't talk to you and just does his thing?
Yo, my dude, I totally agree with you. And longtime listeners to whether it's Wrap It Up or whatever on this On Blast podcast know, one of the things we live by for sure is there's levels to this shit, right? And the next level above being a good teammate is being a leader. And I think that's more important. And I think that's what MJ was, leading by example. Because, again, if they didn't win, if he didn't have the results, then none of this works. And he is just an asshole. But as Will Perdue said, he was an asshole, he was a jerk, but he won. So, and Scotty backs that up and says, they needed that. You could tell Scotty, it's very interesting what Scotty would have been without Mike. Because, of course, we know Mike needed Scotty. But we know that Mike's kind of beast mode mentality really, really helped Scottie Pippen's career a lot, no? And just being that guy to, like, stay on him and be hard on him in practice and have those tough practices when we're in an NBA now where, first off, they don't even really practice anymore, right? Like, it's so hard to fathom just the differences between now and then, but also to paint the picture, especially if you never really played any sports at all, to know what, I've always said this, and I know it sounds weird. I don't even care what you do. If you win and you put in work, that's all that matters to me, right? Like, we can figure everything else out. I can get over it if you're an asshole, if you're a jerk. Like, I don't care. Do you put in work? All right, cool. I'm with you. If you're a leader and you know what you're talking about and you know what you're doing, I can rock with that. No problem. But it's the dudes who are, Michael Jordan could get away with that. J.R. Smith can't. Deion Waiters can't.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? And
Right.
I don't mean to knock those guys. I'm just making the point that there's levels to it, right?
Two things. First is all of that ragging on him and all of that leadership stuff that MJ did with Burrell ended up paying off, because didn't he score like 29 in a playoff game?
Yeah, they show it later on. I think it's in episode 8 against the Nets, I think it is. Burrell has a big game. And you make a great point there, man. It's so true. He was always, and even with the fight with Steve Kerr, MJ's point was, if you can't handle this in practice, right, how are you going to handle stuff in the playoffs? And that makes so much sense. And it's so true, right? If you can't handle those moments then with no one, what are you going to do when the lights come on? And he had to know that he was able to trust you. And maybe that leads us into the Steve Kerr thing, because this was said to be the moment where MJ gained more respect for Steve Kerr. And we've always heard stories about this fight, but I don't think we ever got like the full-on play-by-play in terms of, you know, Phil getting Kerr to guard Mike and Mike's just killing him. But then Phil starts calling like cheap fouls to help Kerr out. And then Mike on purpose hard fouls Steve Kerr. Kerr pushes Mike in the chest, and then MJ decks him. And first off, imagine this in this Twitter era. Like, how incredible is that? What did you think of this whole back and forth with Steve Kerr and Michael Jordan? Well, hearing them explain it.
I'm surprised we haven't gotten something like this coming out in the Twitter era in the NBA. But like you say, the guys barely practice anymore, let alone run these scrimmages where like there's going to be hard fouls, right? Now, True. The thing is with MJ and Steve Kerr, like at that point, I think Steve Kerr is like, after I stood up for myself, like MJ knew that I was going to do that, right? So they were cool afterwards. Now, the other thing is like in that, I think that Steve Kerr proved to MJ that he cared.
Yeah.
You know, like he wasn't just in it to coast along to titles. He wasn't just in it to carry MJ's jock around. He was in it because he wanted to be there. He felt like he was one of the cogs on the best team in history, and he cared. And I think that as soon as you showed that to MJ, you were all good. He wasn't going to call you a hoe when you were shooting free throws like Scott Burrell did, right? Like, I'm sure that Jordan would have kept doing that to Scott Burrell until he stood up for him. And MJ has that line like, oh, I was going to get him to punch me and start a fight, but in a good way. And I think that in a good way was what happened with Kerr and MJ.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a couple things here, right, where, you know, MJ hard fouls Kerr and Kerr pushes him in the chest. And it kind of reminded me of the Batista-Rugnet-Ordur scuffle, just in terms of, I always say Bomani described this the best way, Bomani Jones, for those who might not know who that is, dude on ESPN, but he said Batista was getting ready, whereas Ordur stays ready. And it's kind of like when you push a guy in the chest, like, you don't really want to fight. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're kind of hoping that you push and then everyone kind of breaks it up.
Hold me back.
Right? And MJ, the other funny part about it was MJ said one of the reasons he apologized too was he felt bad because he punched out the smallest dude on the court. Right. And he said he felt like super small himself. He felt like a loser because he punched out the smallest guy on the court. But also, he had to get Kerr's number, which I kind of found funny because I was just like, wouldn't you just have all your teammates' phone numbers?
No, man. Like, not back in the day, right? Like, shit. It was only...
We're taking it for granted now.
However many, like, phones fit in your speed dial, which was, like, 8. And then, like... if you were writing them down in your little black book, but of course those are going to be saved for more important numbers than your teammates. It's not like today where you can just throw in, you know, thousands of contacts and like have Steve Kerr at the drop. So that I was like, yeah, I'm sure you'd have to like talk to the assistant to the traveling secretary to try and get Steve Kerr's number.
So who do you think? I bet a bunch of people probably had Kerr's number, but how many guys do you think had MJ's phone number?
Oh, it's like 3. right? It's Phil, it's Scotty, and
Scott
Opie's
Burrell. Gotta be Scott Burrell's got to have his number. No,
I don't know if Scott Burrell would have his number.
you can't just be calling me a hoe and like you can't even give me a phone call every once in a while.
Called him hoe a couple of times in the episode.
Oh man, it's so good, so good.
Now the other thing is, one more thing about Scott Burrell was that, do you know that he was drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays?
No, I did not know that.
Here's the thing about Scott Burrell, a much better baseball player than Michael Jordan.
But do you think he said that to MJ ever?
Hell no. What, do you think he's crazy?
The MJ shit talking, man, is so cool. And one of the best images of this whole thing was the shot of, I guess it's from the Peyton series, the Sonics finals. Was that it? No, I think it was, no. It's from that season, but it's from after they struggled in, I guess, one of the opening rounds.
Against the
MJ is sitting. They went to OT or something like that. Oh, no. Do you know what it was? It was a BJ Armstrong game. It was a BJ Armstrong game. So it's after BJ Armstrong wins that game, but then the next day they're showing them in the locker room, and MJ's there with a cigar. And this is pregame. My guy is smoking a cigar, has a baseball bat, and he's just sitting there like so gangster-like. And it's just, you're watching that thinking, he's the fucking man. No. Like he doesn't seem worried. He doesn't seem fazed at all. He's not worried. But then he gives another gangster quote where he says, he's talking about trash talking and how easy it is, at certain points to trash talk compared to other points. He says, quote, "That's a sign of a good man if he can talk shit when the score's even, or talk shit when you're behind score.
Yeah.
When you're ahead, it's easy to talk." I mean, chalk another one up. That's another Instagram caption. No?
Well, the other one is like you said about the Drake lines. The image that everybody I've seen on Instagram now, all since this episode, was the him with the bat and the cigar in the locker room. Everybody put that up on their story immediately.
So good. What were we talking about here? We were after Steve Kerr, the Bulls. So it kind of keeps bouncing back and forth. We get the Bulls without Mike and how that went. But really, that's all setting up, I'd say, one of the most infamous moments of Scottie Pippen's career.
And this was the part that I had forgotten about.
So I remembered it, but again, it was the details, because it was one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I do remember Scottie refusing to go in, but I honestly didn't remember if Kukoc hit the shot or not. So like watching it, I was like, oh shit, Scottie, and he hit the shot? Yeah. Like, you're a chump. Like, that's the part I forgot. Not
only that, but they showed all the times that season and the season before of Kukoc hitting that shot. And I know that this is going to sound completely blasphemous, but man, did that shot ever look like Dirk Nowitzki. Like, that's a Dirk shot. That is a Dirk shot right there.
The other thing, too, like, with 1.8 seconds left on the clock, that ball has to just go to, like, a crazy clutch shooter. And I don't know if that's Scottie. You know what I mean? Like, it's the right call that Phil made, and I'm not playing the hindsight game, but as you said, they showed all these other moments of Kukoc hitting last-second shots throughout the season. And if you're Scottie, I mean, maybe if you're mad that you're inbounding the ball instead of maybe being on the court and being a decoy, but that doesn't even seem to be why he was mad. Like, he wanted the ball in that moment. But either way, like, to me, that's an ultimate bitch move by Scottie. And I don't think that you could ever live that down from your teammates. Like, they might say that they forgive you, but they definitely will never forget that.
Well, no, and not only that, but like we got a whole like montage of how happy the team was that when Scottie was the leader, like, oh, everybody's getting their shots, everybody's passing the ball around, we're really making use of the triangle offense, we're sharing the ball. But then when it comes down to it, it's like that selfishness, it rises up, right?
Well, you get a glimpse into, maybe there's something underlying there where Scottie was never actually ever good with how much credit he didn't get or maybe how much credit he got in comparison to Mike. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe that was one of those underlying things where he's thinking, hey, maybe this can be my, shot over Elo. And instead you're giving the ball to Kukoc. Right. Do you know, like,
well, now
it's tough, but that's a terrible play. And shouts to Bill Cartwright.
Yes.
OG leader on the squad. Like, I thought that was awesome. And him apologizing, even Scotty crying and apologizing in the moment, like, nah, that's not, like, I get it and I understand it. But again, I would never forget that. And you could tell even MJ calling Phil and being like, yeah, Scotty's never going to be able to live that down. You could tell here that MJ you could tell there's an interesting dynamic between MJ and Scotty, no?
Well, you're right. But then the other thing is, too, that this seems to be the culmination of a lot of, like, we've talked about this Scotty being kind of a bitch, like, over the first couple of episodes, right? There's the migraine thing, and we're just kind of questioning it. And it seems like this is the part where, like, it came to a head, right? And so the teammates had to say, listen, Scott, you can't be doing this anymore. You're quitting on us, with no MJ here. And then it seems like from this point on, now I might be forgetting something over the next couple episodes, but after this, Scotty was in line.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. Just MJ comes back, obviously, and the totem pole or the pecking order is back. But then you still get, all the Scotty complaining about his contract, which I was looking at something today and it popped up on my on one of the YouTube wormholes you end up in.
Yeah.
And it was just like this video about all of Scotty's kids. Like I didn't realize Scotty has like 7 kids and a bunch of different baby mamas that were going on during the 90s.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, maybe that's why he really needed to change up his contract during the 90s. I'm like, okay. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. But beyond that, you're right. It's just, how could you look your teammates in the eyes, like those guys that look to you as the leader? And we were just talking about it, right? The levels to it in terms of being a great teammate and a great, player, and then being a leader. And that you can't be a leader after that. Like you quit on the team in the biggest moment. Like inbound the ball, then maybe get mad about it afterwards. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. And
make your point made.
Do it behind closed doors. Do it privately with the coach and the GM. Don't have a hissy fit at the end of a playoff game that's one possession where you need to score, right?
But a hissy fit, and then even just to say I'm not playing. And Phil was like, wait, what? What do you mean he's not going in? Like and if you remember this happened with LeBron, where David Blatt drew up a last second play. Shouts to David Blatt, by the way.
Shouts to David Blatt, who made it to an NBA Finals.
He drew up a last second play against the Bulls, but he drew it up so LeBron was inbounding the ball.
Yeah.
Remember that? And LeBron, obviously, because he's LeBron, told the media about it afterwards and said, nah, fuck that. Like, I'm getting the ball. And he hit the game-winning shot.
Yeah, no. And I just saw the clip of this the other day, right? Blatt drew it up, and then they went out there, and LeBron was just like, no, guys, this is what we're doing. You're getting me the
ball. And I know it's different. It's David Blatt. It's Scotty, not LeBron, and it's Phil, not David Blatt. So I understand that. I just found it funny. And also LeBron just LeBron didn't have to tell that story in the post game either. But we all know what happened to Blatt.
Did David Blatt make an NBA Finals and then never coach another NBA game in his career?
That is correct.
That's insane.
I mean, yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, yeah. But yeah, chalk that Scottie Pippen scenario under, man, what would happen if that also happened in 2020?
Oh my God. I think Skip Bayless's head would explode.
Stephen A. would lose his mind. Right? That would be incredible.
There would be some takes, man.
There would be some takes. So I got a little quick kind of like rapid fire thing here for you, Webby, because there's this theme here where MJ, uses other people's slights towards him as motivation.
Yeah, I know. This is his
some
MO.
Greater than others, but it's kind of been a theme here. So we're going to use a couple examples from episodes 7 and 8. And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, I'm just going to ask you how much blame do you think this person deserves in terms of getting MJ mad? Okay?
Okay.
So first up, we'll say BJ Armstrong. And we know BJ Armstrong in the first game of the playoffs against his former team has a great game, hits the dagger shot, and then screams towards the bench, screams at MJ, screams at Scotty, screams at everyone. And then, of course, Mike proceeds to kill him the next game.
Yeah, the next game, the next couple of games.
For sure. How much blame does BJ Armstrong deserve out of 1 to 10 for making MJ mad?
I'm going to say an 8.
An 8? Okay.
I mean,
fair enough.
It's game 1. You got to know that, listen, it's not going to be it's going to be a long series if you're even going to be in it against the Chicago Bulls. I understand it's your former team, but it is game 1. So even if you do hit that shot, maybe you're allowed to celebrate. But you're right; it seemed like he was getting a little too into it.
Yeah.
Especially, and he played with Jordan for how long? You know,
MJ even says he should have known better.
He's got to know better. He's got to know better. So I was going to say solid 8. I'd say it's solid 8 there.
Next up, we go to the 96 finals, before the finals, and Ahmad Rashad and MJ are out for dinner.
Oh, hold on, don't skip over.
No, don't worry. I'm not. Don't worry. I'm definitely not skipping it. Don't worry. And George Karl's sitting at a table across the room, but they walk by afterwards, and George Karl does not say hi to Michael Jordan at dinner. And we know Mike was not happy about this because he thought that was his Carolina guy. You know, they had Carolina connects. And MJ then proceeded to obviously beat the Sonics and win his fifth championship at that point. How much blame do you give George Karl on a scale to 1 to 10 for making MJ mad?
I'm giving this one a 4.
Okay.
Because there was no active maliciousness on George Karl's part. Listen, it's a busy restaurant. Your mind is on the finals. Listen, I'm sure that there were a lot of NBA players, a lot of people who were playing in the finals that night. And what's George Karl supposed to do? You want him to go and kiss the ring? Do you want him to go and pledge fealty to Michael Jordan here? No, he's the coach of the opposing team. Listen, we all want our combatants to... we hate when people are too chummy when they're supposed to be playing in high stakes NBA finals games. So I don't really blame George Karl all that much. Now I give him a 4 because he knew what he was doing.
So
George Karl's no dummy. He knows that he was trying to play a little bit of head games with MJ, but he should have, again, like BJ Armstrong, should have known better.
And you know what? Like BJ Armstrong is BJ Armstrong. So this might be like your moment, right? Like you just beat MJ. Have your moment, get your shine on. I'm not even mad at you, BJ Armstrong. George Karl in this situation, I saw him on with Scott Van Pelt last night, and he was saying that the reason why he did that was because Brendan Malone, again, first head coach in Raptors history,
right.
But Brendan Malone was an assistant with the Bad Boy Pistons, as we've seen earlier on in the doc. And Brendan Malone at that point was now with the Sonics. And he told George Karl, listen, don't do anything to Mike. All Mike does is he's looking for something to just take as a slight and get mad at and turn into motivation. So don't do anything that he could perceive as a slight at all, or he might think you're playing mind games with him. So George Karl thought that was his mentality. Like, I'm not going to do anything because I'm not going to, try to say something to him and then he takes it the wrong way and then uses that as motivation. The problem is not saying anything. MJ then took that as slight. So there's really no winning. Next up, and we got 2 more here. Okay. But next up, MJ comes back, and first off, I know we didn't touch on it, but the greatest press release ever, just MJ saying, I'm back.
Right,
but
so good.
He comes back in the wise words of Sean Carter. He comes back wearing the 4-5. It ain't to play games with you, it's to aim at you. But he struggles a little bit in the 45. And after Nick Anderson steals the ball off MJ,
right.
picks his pocket, And Nick Anderson in the post game says, well, 45 isn't the same as 23. MJ then goes on to obviously just dominate the series. They don't win that series. They don't. But MJ has a pretty solid series in his first, playoffs back after 18 months off playing baseball. Right. But in terms of MJ going to work and being obviously upset to where he comes back the next game wearing 23, how much blame does Nick Anderson deserve for making MJ mad?
Oh, yeah. Here I'm gonna put it at the same level as B.J. Armstrong. Probably about an 8 here, because you knew that as soon as that Nick Anderson said that 45 isn't the same as 23, and then when Jordan walked into the gym the next day wearing the 23, Nick Anderson just started to sweat. Like,
it's on. And also,
what did I do?
And you know what? If I'm MJ, here's the thing. Never in your life can you talk trash about me if you're wearing my shoes. Okay?
Yeah,
that can't be a thing.
Right?
Right. Like, Nick Anderson, like, what are you doing? And I think it was Horace. Horace had the funny reaction where he's just like, why would you say anything like that? Just take the dub, take the win and move on. Now, luckily they won the series, but obviously we know MJ came back with a vengeance the next year. Mm-hmm. But still, I'm with you, Webby. Nick Anderson, come on, man. What are you doing?
No.
But then maybe in one of the funniest stories, your man's LaBradford Smith.
Oh, man.
Who lives kind of in this weird NBA oral history, I guess. I don't even know what the term is I'm looking for here. But he lives in this weird NBA world where you know the name, but you might not know where you know the name from. And right. I just loved how David Aldridge was like, wait, you know the LaBradford Smith story, right? Someone must have told you the LaBradford Smith story.
I was just going to say, that was the best. That's the best kind of setup to any story like that, where somebody's like, oh, wait. You don't know the XYZ story? It's like, oh, now I know that the XYZ story is going to be awesome.
So, LaBradford Smith, I'm going to ask you this question, but I'm going to lay it out as it was presented to us. Okay. Webby? So, LaBradford Smith comes out and he has the game of his life. Drops 37 points on MJ. Meanwhile, MJ struggles in the game, doesn't really have anything going. And after the game, LaBradford Smith says to Mike, "Nice game, Mike." Close quote. The following night, because it happened to be a back-to-back, luckily enough for LaBradford Smith, MJ says that because LaBradford Smith said "nice game, Mike" to him, he was going to go out in the first half and score just as many points as LaBradford Smith did in the entire game the night before. So MJ in the first half goes out and gets 36, just shy, but I think the point was made. How much blame does LaBradford Smith get for making MJ mad, Webby, on a scale of 1 to 10?
What's less than a 1? A 0? Because it comes out that he never said it. He didn't say anything to Mike.
Poor guy.
Oh man. And then poor LaBradford Smith, because that's what you're known for now on in.
Forever. And I don't think he ever had another, I think the stat was he never had another either 20-point game or 25-point game even in the rest of his career after
just
that.
Just absolutely eviscerated.
That's one of those stories where it's like, yo, man, I feel sorry for his kids, right?
Right?
Although luckily your last name's Smith, so there's a lot of Smiths out there. But if it's still, wait, your dad's LaBradford Smith? Where do I know that name from?
Your dad was in the NBA? Oh, what? Would I know him? It's like, well, yeah, maybe.
So good. But yeah, just to close out, a couple things I want to bring up that were just a couple other just awesome scenes. We already talked about it before, the Space Jam Dome. How cool was that? If there was ever a time to have cell phones to where we could just have crazy footage that would be the greatest, most watched YouTube video ever, it would be of those runs, no?
Oh, yeah. I mean, between those and the runs for the Dream Team scrimmages, it's that could be the documentary right there. You could just show me Viz from those two from those two games or those two sessions of ball. That would be the best.
I think you mentioned it earlier, but if you listen to Simmons and Rosillo, Simmons was telling the stories like how, because they were saying like, I wish they would have shown us more Viz, but Simmons said that he made a call to, like, he has friends, obviously he's friends with the director, and he's like, I just want to see all the footage, like I just want to watch it for myself, like we're sitting in quarantine, I got nothing to watch, like I would watch 2 hours of this footage. And dude said, no, that's all the footage there is. We used every last frame in the doc, which makes total sense, right? Because, like, why wouldn't you use more of that just because of how awesome it was? Although seeing Sean Bradley was kind of funny.
I mean, you got to assume, too, when they were talking about that, because I heard that on the podcast as well, that maybe the NBA, who was it, Michael Thompson's brother, maybe he was filming all that stuff, and some of the other players were like, dude, you have to stop filming us because MJ is just torching us, Poor Juwan Howard is just getting rained on or something.
So funny. The other really cool footage, which we've seen a bunch of, but we never really got the explanation, or we never got to hear it, was MJ after winning the championship on Father's Day. And obviously they sum it up, they really break it down and explain, just how much it meant to him to get back to the pinnacle of the game and win it on Father's Day, and how emotional that was for him.
Yeah.
And to just hear him, bawling on the ground, like that was just a super emotional moment, and it was just crazy to see. But what were your thoughts when you saw that?
That I'd seen that Viz before, but I had never heard it. Like, I never heard the audio of that celebration. And again, between that and MJ giving that like statement of, I never put anybody through anything that I didn't want to go through or didn't go through either. Those two were like some very emotional moments. I mean, that was really great filmmaking to include that with the sound.
Yeah. And it's just another one of those things where, people talk about what does it take to win? What does it take to be a champion? And, yes, other people have won NBA championships without being an asshole, right? Or without being a jerk. But they haven't won 6 championships. Do you know what I mean? Like, and yes, you go back to the Bill Russell days, and we know what Bill Russell went through, like, real life-wise in Boston, right? And, like, it's a different era and all that stuff, right? But you're talking about 4 dudes. Do you know what I mean? Like, really, like, the amount of people that we're talking about in terms of that elite level of winning, it's a small handful of guys. And, to see that, and to obviously know, to have everything kind of come full circle where he loses his dad, he doesn't think he can play basketball again without his dad, but his dad's last conversation with him is about playing baseball. He goes and gives that a try, comes back, gets his ass kind of handed to him by the Magic, and then like has a huge workout in the offseason to come back with a vengeance and come back and win. It was just, it was super fitting. It was super fitting.
But, it's a championship that's like 3 years in the making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And just so that we don't end this pod on, such more of a somber note, I wanted to leave maybe one of the funniest clips as MJ continues to be the meme god during this doc. But we get the clips of Gary Payton explaining how mad he was that George Karl wouldn't let him guard Mike until they were already down 3-0 in the series. But Gary Payton is talking about how he felt he was doing such a good job in guarding Mike. And he's going on and on, talking about how he was essentially locking Mike down. And then the camera cuts and you see Mike watching the clips of Gary Payton talking about locking Mike down. And Mike just starts laughing. And that meme is going to be used forever now. No, like, it's just so good. It was so funny.
Yeah, that's the new...
And I kind of feel bad for Gary Payton. No?
It's the new laughing Michael Jordan meme. It used to be the one of him on Oprah, right? And now you can use that one of him looking at the iPad.
Oh, so good. It was incredible. But one of the things Ahmad Rashad tweeted last night, he said, MJ told me that Gary Payton asked him for his shoes after game 1, and that's when he knew he had him.
Yeah.
So with that context, doesn't that kind of lead you more as to why MJ was laughing? Right? And that's just something Ahmad Rashad tweeted. He didn't say that in the doc. MJ didn't say that in the doc.
I was going to say Bob Costas put that series pretty succinctly when he said, this is the most uneven mismatch in NBA Finals history. It wouldn't matter if you had the glove or the gauntlet or whatever you want to call Gary Payton. They were not going to lose. They were not going to lose to the Seattle Supersonics.
It was just so good.
They just weren't.
Such great storytelling again as we wrap up episodes 7 and 8. Is so good. By far, I don't even want to say by far because I thought the other episodes were still really good. And it's a good sign when you can have a 10-part series and after watching 8, you're saying that it's still getting better and better.
Yeah.
Like, that's an incredible feat. So it's been really good so far. I've super enjoyed it, Webby, and I've enjoyed these conversations with you as well, my dude. But if the people wanted to hit you up, where can they find you online?
Oh, very easy on both Twitter and Instagram. It's the same, at @awebster84.
And you can find me on Twitter at Shell Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. And of course, again, thanks to all the people that are rocking with us on the On Blast podcast, whether you're on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube. Continue to like and subscribe and rate us and rank us and all that fun stuff because, you know, we appreciate it. We appreciate hearing from you guys and gals and, you know, ball fans of all levels.
Yeah. Don't forget
how you're enjoying this doc. I was talking to one of my friends the other day and she was saying like she loves it. Like she was talking about how much she was enjoying it and it's like so much fun to just see like him tell the stories and how like competitive he is. It's just been such an amazing ride, Webby. I've enjoyed it so much, man. And I mean, I can't wait to see how it's going to end in episodes 9 and 10 coming up this week. I can't wait to see that.
I think we're going to see a little bit of Reggie Miller and Karl Malone over these next 2 episodes.
Woo! Can't wait to see that for sure. That's going to be a lot of fun, and can't wait to reconvene again one last time to talk to you about The Last Dance. See what I did there? One last time to talk about The Last Dance. I didn't even.
What are we going to do?
Straight off the dome, by the way.
What are we going to do once this documentary is over?
We're going to have to like go back to just watching normal TV and finding stuff that way to watch.
Oh,
I guess.
Man.
I don't know.
It's wild.
Because like this has been the only sports for me. Like I don't care enough about the UFC to care about the UFC during a pandemic. So I don't care about that. And I definitely don't care about the Korean Baseball League or the Bundesliga. So y'all got to keep trying with that to make me care about sports that are coming back. Like I don't care about any of that, so we'll figure some stuff out for sure. We always do here on the On Blast podcast, right, Webby?
Absolutely, brother.
As always, like I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the On Blast podcast, as always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.
Peace.
On blast.